So now we're going to be talking about the HIV and AIDS crisis. Maybe you've heard in the past of HIV and AIDS, of it being an epidemic and how severe it was, but you didn't really know what it was about. You just knew kind of like, okay, something happened with the disease and it affected the gay community, and I don't know why. I did not know either. I just kind of vaguely heard about it. I didn't know any details about it, and then I researched it, and boy did I learn a lot, and it was very bad. So first, we need to understand what is the difference between HIV and AIDS and why are those terms separate from each other. HIV is the virus itself, a virus that leads to an immune system deterioration. AIDS is the most advanced and most deadly stage of HIV. It is, I believe, stage 4 of HIV, and someone who has HIV won't necessarily get to the stage of having AIDS. So the reason that this was so deadly and such a big deal is because HIV had similar symptoms to the flu. You had fatigue, fever, chills, night sweats. But what it was actually doing was binding to your DNA and does not have a clear cure, even to this day. It's more like we have much better ways of treating it. Symptoms of AIDS include rapid weight loss, recurring fever and night sweats, extreme fatigue, neurological disorders, pneumonia, blotches on the skin, inside the mouth and eyelids, and swelling. The thing about HIV is that it binds with your DNA. You have it for the rest of your entire life. And what it's doing to you is that even though the disease itself isn't necessarily attacking your body, it makes your immune system and your body defenseless from other diseases and anything else that can come to you. So a virus that might normally not really affect you, or that you might just get a little sick from and then recover from, HIV makes it so that your immune system will not fight that. HIV transmits through bodily fluids such as sexual contact, birth, breastfeeding, and contaminated needles. And so now we're going to be going through a timeline of HIV. And the reason that we're doing this is because I think that it's very valuable to understand HIV was influenced by the severe political climate. Because of the sexual contact that gay and bi men were having, they were more at risk to contract the disease. In 1981, the epidemic began. Health officials first realized that there was an issue when they saw these groups of young, healthy gay men that were suddenly getting sick and dying very quickly, and they did not know or understand the cause. It quickly became politicized that since this disease was affecting this specific group, that this was the quote-unquote gay plague. The same year, the CDC and other health institutions had funding cuts from the Reagan administration. One of the first times that HIV and AIDS was talked about politically, there was a very respected Republican politician who talked about it, but when he talked about it, all that he did was make fun of the disease and talk about how it's the gay plague, and he talked very vulgarly about what he thought happened during gay sex and how they contracted the virus. This made talking about the topic, which was already taboo, even more unfavorable to all the politicians. In 1982, there was the first White House press briefing that talked about the disease, where a reporter asked and inquired about HIV. Around the time, there were about 600 people that were dead because of it, and the press secretary who was representing the Reagan administration and did in these next White House press briefings just talked about how it was a gay plague. He didn't know anything about it, and then he started to make fun of it, that the rest of the reporters and the press started laughing about it. He asked the reporter who asked the question, "Do you have it? I don't have it. The president doesn't have it." Basically insinuating that in the reporter asking that the reporter being interested or asking about that question at all meant that he himself was gay, and that was a disgusting and terrible thing. I can't describe to you how horrifying it is to hear from primary sources of what these people said. There are certain things that you hear about that you just can't even believe happened. Not even just the blatant ignoring of what was going on, but the open mocking and trivializing of people dying in a community. In 1983, you see a lot more restlessness, a lot more protests. People are scared. Their loved ones are dying. They want research done on this topic, and no one is talking about it. And if it is talked about, it's completely made fun of and joked about. In 1984, there is another press briefing in which the president's secretary is asked about the president's opinion on this matter. What does the president think? And the press secretary says that he hasn't mentioned it to the president. He doesn't think the president even knows about it, which is probably not true. And this is 4 years after this epidemic is happening. There are 5,500 people that are dead. And he says, quote unquote, "No, but I must confess I haven't asked him about it." And then he makes more jokes about the situation. A lot of this is influenced by photography that was then put into newspapers, so people, and a lot of, okay, you know what, actually. In 1985, things started changing around more. The CDC made an official HIV plan. President Reagan said the word AIDS for the first time publicly ever, and he said that it was the top priority, even though clearly he did not care about it or acknowledge it ever before, and his administration never did. People started to realize that this issue was a global issue that didn't only affect gay people and gay communities, but would also affect them. And a huge part that influenced people's reaction towards HIV changing was photography. It was a huge thing. This photographer named Nicholas Nixon started to photograph people who had HIV and AIDS. Sadly, it was one of the ways that started to actually humanize gay people. The thing about these pictures is that a lot of them were so horrifying and heartbreaking to see. People started to realize these gay people are people. They saw the families crying over their dead bodies. They saw people that weren't just gay men that were affected by the virus. And they thought, that's horrible. And it could happen to us. That's crazy. That's when there started to be more awareness around this topic, when people started to care more.
Hi, I just had so much film left for this video, and honestly, the event is going to start soon, so I really need to finish this. So I'm just going to summarize what happened. Basically, there was a lot more awareness around HIV and AIDS. Eventually, there was more research done, and even though there were a bunch of different types of drug trials that had varying effects, and a lot of them didn't work very well because they weren't actually consulting the patients while they were running the drug trials. All they were doing was basically just running that trial and going, hey, let's see if that worked or not. But they never asked that person if they felt any different, how they were doing. Dr. Fauci was the one who revolutionized that apparently very out there idea. And what happened after that is it just happened to be that a lot of the statistics for people with HIV and who were dying from HIV, it was lowering a lot more. I think it lowered by 23%, which was the most that it had lowered to during the entire epidemic's start. I believe this was around, the 1990s or so. And at this time, a lot of people believe that the peak of HIV and AIDS was completely over, but clearly that this was only the case for those who were privileged enough to afford having care and being able to be diagnosed sooner and get their treatment properly. And because while you saw a lot of people, while you saw these death rates going down, the truth is that you saw a lot of the people that were dying and contracting HIV and AIDS was black people, and their statistics were becoming higher. And a lot of that was probably because there wasn't a lot of research done on people of other races besides white people, and so just there being any research done at all may have shown that the statistics were higher, but also there wasn't, of course, that much of a equal treatment within healthcare as well. And so later on, as we enter on and on into the 2000s, there's more and more drug treatments and trials. Dr. Fauci's revolutionary idea of consulting patients makes things go better and faster. They end up being able to not just test people and see what happens, they're able to finally test them and treat them with something that they know can be helpful. And we're still researching and trying to figure out things about HIV and AIDS today because it is still uncurable. And there are currently millions and millions of people living with HIV and that have died from HIV. I believe it's 37.8 million people who have died as of today. So it is